Hello everyone, welcome back. Alright, let's get right on to chapter 2. I took it a little too easy on the morning of my day off. I was totally late. And to top it off, that pesky mom of mine pushing a return journey errand on me just as I'm trying to leave the house. Today was the day Rena and Mion were going to show me around Hinamizawa. Rena and Mion were already waiting at the meeting place.
ケイちゃん遅いぞ。
悪い悪い。責めるのは夕べの面白かった特番に行ってくれ。
ほう、女の子との待ち合わせに遅刻して言い訳がそれってわけ？
みーちゃんだって今来たばかりなんだよ。
夕べの密着24時間面白かったし、ねえ。
She was just as guilty as me. Rena was carrying a pretty heavy-looking handbag. What is that? Mion answered my unspoken question with a wink. That's right, Rena really did make a picnic.
ケイちゃん、あの後レナ大張り切りだったらしいよ。
別に俺がけしかけたわけじゃないだろう。
そんな大変じゃなかったから気にしないでよね。
夕べから今朝まであのテンションらしいよ。責任取れんの？
わかった。俺も男だ。責任は取る。
責任ってなんだろう。
As we both turned around slowly to look at Rena, our gazes drifted downwards to the massive handbag she was carrying. It didn't seem logically feasible that it would be entirely filled with lunchboxes. Except this was Rena we were talking about here.
2キロくらいかな。
レナね、荷物持つときよっこらしょって言ってた。5キロ。
それはオーバー。ケイチくん男の子だからきっといっぱい食べるだろうと思ってたくさんね。もう行こう。よっこらよっこ。
Just from the way she was lifting it up, I couldn't believe the only things in there were lunchboxes.
訂正。俺も5キロ。
手伝いはするけど全部食べるんだからね。レナを悲しませたら許さないよ。
The only thing I could do at that moment was exercise a bit to make myself hungrier. Having finished with the pleasantries, we began our leisurely stroll. A carefree walk bathed in the gentle morning sun. I couldn't have even imagined something so wholesome existed during my time in the city. These were the boonies, after all. No slovenly desk jockeys trudging to work on the weekends out here. It really was a nice place, peaceful and quiet. As sparsely populated as the village was, you could still run into people just by walking around.
あ、こんにちは。
こんにちは。あら、そちらは。確か前原くんだったかしら。
My two companions exchanged greetings with everybody we ran across. All of these passersby even knew my name.
なんで俺ってこんなに有名人なんだ。
We passed 3 people, and when all 3 of them knew me, I started to feel a bit paranoid.
悲しいかな。南沢は人が少ないからね。みんな顔見知りなんだよね。
つまりなんだ。知らない顔が歩いてれば、それは自動的に新しく引っ越してきた前原さんってことになるわけか。
うん、そういうことになるね。
It was a process of elimination you could only pull off in a place like this, but it was quite effective. From now on, I'd better make sure to maintain a good reputation. The day I'm discovered accidentally gawking at a dirty magazine in the bookstore, I can expect all the villagers labeling me as a lech by the next day. Hinamizawa is not to be trifled with. That's not the end of this nightmare.
もちろんわかるよ。最初に会ったのが牧野林店の竹蔵おじさん。趣味は盆栽と尺八なんだよ。
次が乾物屋の次男の大輔くん。趣味は狙撃で、将来の夢は超 A 級スナイパーだとか。それで今の人は入江診療所の看護師の美代さん。趣味は野鳥の観察と撮影だって。
すれ違った全員の名前までわかるのかよ。プロフィールまで。
Seeing my surprise, Mion and Renan exchanged looks and burst into laughter.
まあね、ここいらは都会みたいにご近所付き合いが希薄じゃないからね。
試しに聞いてみよう。今ここにいる俺は誰だ？
前原圭一くん。意地悪なこと言うけど本当は優しいテレ屋さん。
転校してきてようやく3週間。趣味は昼寝。最近トランクス派に転校したよね。
もういいもういい。
トランクス。
それもいい。
Apparently, there is absolutely nothing you can keep hidden here. Hinamizawa was not a place to be trifled with.
これじゃあさ、俺のための案内ってより俺のお披露目みたいだな。
そうだね。うちらさ、これだけ賑やかに練り歩いてたからね。みんな思うんじゃない？ケイちゃんもひなみ沢に馴染んでくれたんだって。
ひなみ沢は過疎だから村中みんなが新しい仲間を歓迎してくれてるの。
I thought about brushing it off with something to the effect of, "You're kidding me," but I held back. Had I ever greeted someone who just moved into the city like this before? Thinking about that made me believe what they said wasn't a joke at all. We passed another person. Of course, we were called out to again the same way.
あらこんにちは。仲良しそうでいいわね。
藤島さんちのおばさんだよ。こんにちは。
あら前原くん、両手に花でいいわね。どう？生活はもう慣れた？
Instead of regurgitating a prepared response like I would have in the city, I responded with an emphatic nod. The old woman chuckled, voicing her appreciation of how energetic I was.
グッド。
As I looked back over to Ren and Mion, they gave me a wink.
でね、そろそろお昼にしないかな。
Rena's brilliant smile signaled the approach of an event that both Mion and I were trying to forget. We both looked at each other.
俺も男だ。努力はする。だが量が多すぎる。
よしケイちゃん、ここはおじさんに任せなさい。
Mion has never seemed as reliable as she does right now. I'd expect no less from the class representative.
レナ、どうせ食べるならさ、見晴らしのいいところで食べない？
それいい。賛成。
Rena nodded her head happily in response to Mion's proposal. Cresting the top of a stone stairway, a shrine drawn straight out of my imagination appeared before us. It had worn down a bit through the years, but the fallen leaves had been swept up, giving it a tidy feeling.
ここはね、古出神社っていうの。多分見晴らしが一番いいところかな。
ここの場所、よく覚えといてね。もうすぐここでお祭りがあるんだから。
へえ、祭りにしちゃちょっと早いシーズンだよな。
綿流しは夏祭りじゃなくてね、昔は冬の終わりを喜ぶお祭りだったらしいよ。
I was embarrassed for assuming that festivals had to be held in the summer.
さて、弁当を広げてっと。
Various colored lunchboxes were placed one after the other on top of the plastic sheet. It sure did smell delicious. It was It was Rena's home cooking. It went without saying that would be delicious. But is it even possible to finish all of this? Hey, Mion, it'll take more than just a good view to get this all down, you know.
こんにちはです。
It was Rika-chan and Satoko. Why are they here? Mion grinned over at me. I see. This was her secret plan. The power in numbers. You have my thanks, Mion. Following up when all the pieces are in place is my specialty.
騒がしいから来てみれば、これは何ですの？
見りゃわかるだろ。これからランチタイムだ。ビュッフェスタイルだ。レラの手作り弁当に舌鼓だ。
そんなの見ればわかるでございますわ。どうして人様の庭でご座なんか広げてますの？
神社は公共の場所だぞ。勝手に独占するな。
圭一の言う通りですよ。みんなのお庭にしますです。
くー、やっぱりリカちゃんはいい子だな。座りな、そこ。一緒に食べよう。
After opening up a spot for Rika-chan, I promptly turned my back on Satoko.
ちょっとお待ちなさいな。私はどこに座ればいいんですの？
お前に座る場所はないし、食べる分もない。
大丈夫だよ。さとこちゃんの分もちゃんとあるから。
ない。さとこの分も俺がいい。
そんなことは許せませんの。リカ。はい、お箸です。
Both Satoko and I leapt at the boxes, having it out with each other.
いやはや、ケイちゃん乗せるのうまいわ、ほんと。才能あるのかもしれない。
はい、お皿。みーちゃんもリカちゃんも。
Rena whipped out pairs of chopsticks and paper plates.
僕たちも頑張らないとなくなってしまうです。
そうだね。よし、参戦と行くかな。
いっぱい食べてね。ちゃんとみんなの分あるから。
Rena said as she opened up a thermos. Just then, I realized that this lunch was made under the assumption that 5 people would be eating. It didn't change how much there was, but the implication behind it was different.
そのハンバーグは渡しませんわ。
いや、肘は反則だろう、さとこ。
襟首をつかむのも反則でございます。
It was a tough battle. Blocking her with full momentum and an elbow in the opening moves, Satoko appeared to have the upper hand. But the difference in our proficiency with chopsticks proved to be fatal and gave me the upper hand.
最後のミートボール。
校長さとこ、破れたり。
Satoko and I amiably began choking at the same time, falling backwards and spasming. Rika-chan patted me on the head to clear it, even though it was actually stuck in my throat. Seeing that made Rena blush and breathe heavily in excitement. It was almost like flowers floating all around her. Mion advised Rena to refrain from saying anything that could get her locked up. This is how our meals usually go. I'd do anything in my power, just so things could stay like this. The intense battle calmed, and finally everyone reached a point where they could begin talking. Receiving tea from the thermos, I let out a small sigh.
日本語ってやつはさ、どうしてこう味に対する賛辞が少ないんだろうな。
食事中の団らんって考えがそもそも近代に入ってからだからじゃない？
昔の人は無言で食事を済ませたそうだし、作る人もちょっぴり寂しかったろうね。きっと昔の人は食べるのに忙しくて味を褒める暇もなかったのですわ。
That's just you.
でもね、美味しいの一言だけでも嬉しいよ。苦労の甲斐があったかなって。
She blushed a little as she said that.
美味しいです。
With absolutely perfect timing, Rika-chan struck Rika-chan struck Rena directly with praise. She looked straight at her with an expression of bewitching innocence.
Huh?
After Rena uttered an unintelligible noise, a ring of smoke rose from her head with an audible poof.
リカちゃん、お持ち帰りじゃなくて、ありがとう。本当に美味しかったですよ。
Rena flushed red with excitement, embracing Rika-chan and rubbing her cheek against her so hard you could almost hear it.
リカちゃんには褒めてもらったお礼に、じゃーん、これをサービスね。
2 apple rabbits. After sticking toothpicks into them, she thrust them forward. She thrust them toward Rika-chan. After Rika-chan accepted them, the mood suddenly shifted in a bizarre way.
なんだよサトコ、その挑戦的な目は。
皆さんにはレナさんのリンゴを獲得できるだけの賛辞が用意できまして。
強気じゃんよ。ボキャ品のあんたにどんな賛辞が思いつくっての？
では、ご覧あそばせ。
After Satoko flashed Mion and me a defiant look, she changed the tone of her voice suddenly.
エレナお姉ちゃんのお弁当、サトコも美味しかったよ。
Satoko looked up at her proudly while talking cutesy. Wah! How was that praise? That's not even persuasion by tears, that's persuasion by cuteness, isn't it? This is a Rena limited special skill. She blushed and her head spun, waving around in circles. Don't fall for it, Rena! Of course, that was asking for the impossible. Rena glomped Satoko and began rubbing her cheeks against her cheek.
かいかい。サトコちゃんもかいよ。お持ち帰り。はう。
Swish, stab, push. Satoko was also presented with apple rabbits. After stuffing them into her mouth, she looked over at Mion and me again with that defiant gaze. It took only 5 seconds to take down Rena. That's unfair, to think she had such a trick.
悔しければレナさんにご褒美がもらえるような賛辞をお考えあそばせ。
Kusa! That was a dirty trick! First of all, that wasn't even praise!
サトコ、それで勝てたつもりとはね。あんたらの底の浅い技とはわけが違うものを見せてあげようじゃない。
それは頼もしいぜミオ。それはどんな技なんだ？
やるのはケイち
はあ？
見せてもらおうではございませんか。戸島のあがきを。
The plan of attack she suggested was wicked. But it was the only thing we had to beat Satoko. After sipping my tea, I started talking, very naturally and calmly. Perfectly.
本当に美味しいよな。これってさ、全部手作りなのかい？
実はね、これほとんど冷凍物なの。
じゃあレナの手作りのってどれだい？
その恥ずかしいな。教えなきゃダメ？どうしても？
From the synergy of Boy Plus handmade lunchbox, her expression had melted into euphoria.
わかるよ。これでしょ。
Rena turned an even deeper shade of red, the words "I can't believe it" practically written on her face.
なんでわかるかな？かな？レナの手作り。
Of course, Mion had told me beforehand. It's been perfect so far. After acting like I was shy, I waited a beat. Next would be the finisher.
レナの匂いがしたから。
Silence enveloped the area. Rena, face still completely red, froze solid. With a small yelp, Satoko also blushed. Of course, I did too.
レナの手作りのリンゴのウサギさんが食べたいな、なんて。
Even if this was all because I was competing against Satoko, it felt like I had crossed the line by a good 9 yards, I think. Then, at that moment, whoosh! It was a Tupperware container filled with rabbits.
食べてね、ケイチ君。いっぱいあるんだよ。
What? Instantly, dozens of the apples were shoved into my mouth, knocking me over.
はい、あして、ケイチ君。
My head was forcibly laid upon her lap, and even more apples were shoved into my mouth. While she was squealing, one apple after another was forced in my mouth. More and more apples.
ほうがはほほへはきごはひは。
ケイちゃん、殉職見事なり。どうよ、さとこ。うちらの完全勝利だね。
こんな手信じられないですの。悔しくないもん。
Satoko ground her teeth, mortified. We did it! I claimed victory as my consciousness drifted slowly away from me. At that time, Rena stopped her squealing as she suddenly realized something.
リカちゃん、食べないの？塩水強すぎたかな？
Looking over, Rika-chan had pulled the toothpick out of the apple rabbit, placed it into her cupped hands, and seemed to be at a loss as for what to do.
うさぎさんがかわいそうです。助けてあげてほしいです。
Pui. That was the sound of blood spurting from Rena's nose.
かわいいよ。今夜こそ絶対本持ち帰り。
She shook sporadically, her head wobbling back and forth. Then, coming back to her senses, she took all the apples around me, gathered them up with a foot, and fixed them back up on the plate.
これでみんな寂しくないよね。これリカちゃんにあげるね。
Rika-chan raised up Satoko's hand like a referee after having that plate of rabbits shoved to her. She whispered,
僕たちが勝ちましたです。
Thus, my sacrifice ended up being in vain. It was a fun-filled, crazy day. But as soon as the sun began to set, the end of the day really did come quickly.
じゃあね、レナにケイちゃん。また明日ね。
ミオ、今日はありがとな。楽しかったぜ。
また明日ね。
Satoko and Rika-chan went home as well. We parted ways with Mion, and it ended with just Rena and myself enjoying the evening air on our way home.
ケイチくんも今日は付き合ってくれてありがとう。楽しかった？
ああ、楽しかった。まだ家に帰るのが惜しいくらいだぜ。
じゃあさ、ちょっとだけ寄り道してもいいかな？
寄り道？遠いのか？
ちょっと歩くけどすぐ済むから。
Since we'd been walking around all day, I must have seemed a bit tired. Not feeling like teasing Rena, I quietly nodded. Traversing a small path and up a small hill, the land suddenly stretched out before us. There, what looked like the remains of a dilapidated construction site came into view. A large heap of garbage spread out off towards the swamp. Probably illegal dumping. I recalled it being in the newspaper.
今日は久しぶりだから何かあるかな何かあるかな。
久しぶりってレナのようはあのゴミの山かよ。
ゴミじゃないよ。レナにとっては宝の山だもん。
Rena had already entered that well-known kawaii mode of hers. So that meant there was something kawaii here?
わあ、新しい山だ。ワクワクワクワク。
She descended the unstable slope with ease. I'd expect no less from a born and bred country girl.
おい待てよ、今行くから。あったたたた。
My city race itself was completely pitiful.
いいよ、ケイチ君はそこにいて。すぐ住むから。
Rena kindly declined my accompaniment.
転ぶなよ。足元に気をつけろよ。
大丈夫だよ、大丈夫。全然平気。
Literally bounding among the heaps of trash, Rena disappeared from sight. I didn't feel like being left behind, but I was still pretty tired from the whole day, so I just ended up waiting. Without the lively Rena around, the surrounding area quickly fell into silence. The cry of the Higurashi gently cooled the air. Fairly exhausted, I began to feel a little sleepy. Just then, the sudden noise of scattering pebbles alerted me to somebody's presence. Startled, I turned around. Standing there was a typical-looking photographer. He spied over at me through his camera. His body was tan and fit, but something about him seemed unreliable, and he had a bit of an aloof air about him. Well, it didn't seem like he was a bad guy in any case.
おっと、びっくりした。
Although startled when I turned around, he overplayed his reaction. That was my line.
驚いたのはこっちですよ。
ごめんごめん。驚かすつもりはなかったんだ。君はひなみ沢の人かい？
I gathered that he wasn't from that question. Unfazed by my suspicious gaze, he introduced himself without my prompting.
僕は富武。フリーのカメラマンさ。ひなみ沢にはたまに来るんだ。
I didn't ask you who you were.
写真ってのは被写体に断ってから撮るのが礼儀なんじゃないんすかね。
ごめんごめん。メインは野鳥の撮影でね。断った試しがないんだよ。
So what? You're saying I'm the same as the birds?
いやいや、夕闇に黄昏る少年があまりにも絵になっていたんでね。本人の許可を取らずにファインダーを覗いたことを謝るよ。
Adults are pretty slick. All that annoyance I felt for being startled just flew away as he buttered me up. I had no intention of hanging around with this guy trying to get cozy with me, except it didn't seem like Rena would be back soon. But this older guy, Tomitake-san, he didn't mind my cautious responses and continued rambling on by himself.
ケイチ君、待たせてごめんね。もう終わりにするから。
Rena popped her head out from one of the lower piles of garbage and waved her hand.
連れがいたのかい？お、彼女はあんなところで何をしているんだい？
That's what I wanted to know.
さあね、昔起こった殺人事件の死体でも探してるんじゃないですか。
Tomitake-san looked shaken up by that for a moment. Uh-oh, I responded like I would if I were talking to Rena and the others.
嫌な事件だったね。まだ見つかってないんだろ？
ケイチ君お待たせ。待ったかな
馬に蹴られる前に退散するかな。驚かせてすまなかったね、ケイイチ君。
Tomitake-san chortled suggestively, then disappeared into the twilight. Missing my chance to retort put me off a bit.
ケイチくん怒ってる？どうしてだろう？
It wasn't Rena's fault, so I decided to just brush it off for now.
どうだった？掘り出し物は見つかったか？
聞いてあのね、あったの。ランディくん人形。
ランディ君人形ってあれか？ファーストフードの店の前に必ず置いてあるあの等身大人形の？
そう、ランディくん。かわいい。お持ち帰りしたい。
I couldn't tell how she decides what's kawaii or not, but, well, she seems to want it.
あれはゴミだろ。お持ち帰りしたきゃしてもいいんだぜ。
他の山の下敷きになってるの。簡単には掘り出せないし、あそこ明かりがないからすぐ暗くなっちゃうし。
Rena seemed quite down about finding a treasure and not being able to bring it back.
俺も手伝ってやるよ。今日のうまかった弁当の恩返しってことでさ。
ありがとう。
Birds heading home to roost proclaimed that nightfall would soon be upon us.
ケイチくんが手伝ってくれる。ランディくんをお持ち帰りできる。
Rena staggered along as if intoxicated in her dreamy state of mind. I tried asking her in a way that wouldn't take her out of her cheery state.
なあレナ、あそこで昔なんかあったのか？
ダムの工事をやってたんだってね。詳しく知らないけど。
例えばさ、工事中になんかあったとか、事故とか。
知らない。
Her tone was disturbingly frank. It sounded more like a denial than an answer. I must have appeared rather dumbstruck. Rena quickly lightened her expression.
実はね、去年までよそに住んでたの。
え、レナも転校生だったのか？俺はてっきり。
だからね、それ以前のことはよく知らないの。ごめんね。
Don't really know, don't want to talk about it. That was the kind of feeling she gave me. Thinking about it, of course it would be like that. This wasn't the type of thing girls would enjoy talking about. It was quite a disturbing incident. They still haven't found one of the arms. If it's just like Tomitake-san said, then I had a feeling only the Higurashi would know. I believe that's the end of chapter 2. Correct? Yep. Alright, so we got 2 more tips to read.
Keiちゃんってさ、すごいお金持ちってわけでもないの？
なんだよ突然。俺がいつ高級車で投稿したよ。
月の小遣いはいくらもらってる
1000円。
結構小市民的ですのね。お弁当のおかずも普通ですよ。お金持ちじゃないです。
What are they talking about? To be asked out of nowhere how much I get and then told that's a plebeian amount?
ごめんね、ごめんね。
Rena seemed to pick up on my dubious expression and started giggling.
ケイちゃんちってさ、すっごく大きいでしょ？だから建築中からひなみ沢中で前原屋敷って呼ばれて注目の的だったんだよ。
Mayabara Manor?
あんなに大きいお家だから、どんなお金持ちなのかなってみんなで噂し合ってたの。
I see. Now I get it. Well, the frame of it is huge. I see how it could cause some misunderstandings.
私の推理ではお家を建てるのにお金をかけすぎて貧乏になってしまったと考えてますのよ。貧乏でかわいそうかわいそうです。
Rika-chan took pity on me as she patted my head. I go from being treated like a millionaire to a beggar.
諸君らの楽しい想像をぶち壊すようで悪いが、うちは金持ちでも貧乏でもないぞ。極めて平均的な普通の家庭だ。
あれだけ大きな家は普通とは言わないって。しかも玄関は立派で門は大型車も入れるようになってるし、絶対普通じゃないって。
They do say the bigger your house, the more prosperous you are. The reason the house is so big is because Dad's studio is in it too. There are a bunch of different workshops, and lots of his works are hung up in different places. All of them are huge too. For those reasons, the family actually uses only a third of the house for day-to-day living. He planned it out so people in cars could come in to see the gallery he opens up in the house someday. By the way, the entranceway Mion is talking about is the one for the studio and is normally sealed off. The entranceway the Maebara family actually uses is a very plain and simple one. The interior is much different from how it looks on the outside.
ぜひ今度ケイちゃんの家を探検してみたいよな。お金持ちじゃないと主張しながらもあの邸宅、一体何が隠されているのか。
かいいものが隠されてるといいな。きっと家具を買うお金もなくなってて殺風景な部屋がいっぱいなのですわ。絨毯のお部屋ならぜひゴロゴロしてみたいですよ。わあ、それいいね、それいいね。レナもゴロゴロしたい。
Seems like their imaginations were just piling on. Well, sometime in the near future, it wouldn't be too bad to invite them all to my house. Dad is a sucker for the ladies, so he might even let them look around his studio. The cry of the Higurashi crescendoed as the sky towered over everything. It was hot, but the air was clear. It smelled like the beginning of summer. From the June XX 1979 edition. The Shishibone City Okinomiya Police Station, June XX, late at night. Suspects, blah 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 blah, were arrested on suspicion of murder and improper disposal of a corpse. The main offender, blah blah. I honestly don't know what to say in place of the X's. Anyway, the main offender has been added to wanted lists nationwide. According to our sources, the six suspects were at the Hinamizawa Dam construction site workroom on the XX at 9 p.m., where they are suspected to have assaulted and murdered the site overseer as a group, dismembering his body and hiding it. On the XX at 8 o'clock in the morning, a report was filed by the Shishibone City Hospital in which a male suspect alluded to having murdered Mr. When questioned at the police station, the individual confessed to the crime. Since a portion of the body was recovered at the location he gave, he was arrested that afternoon on suspicion of murder and mutilation of a corpse. The rest of the suspects were arrested the same day, but the main culprit is still at large. Police are currently on his trail. The motive is purported to be a drunken verbal dispute during which he killed the victim in a fit of anger. However, as there are multiple inconsistencies with their testimonies, the investigation is ongoing. Alright, and that is it for Chapter 2. So, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next chapter. Bye-bye!